An alien woman stared at me in awe and whispered, "Humans are only legends where I'm from." Whispers of the Forgotten Stars. The atmosphere filter in Tessa Reeves' helmet made the air taste like mint and metal, an artificial reminder that she wasn't breathing the actual atmosphere of Valky's 4. The planet's sky stretched above her in shades of amber and violet, a cosmic bruise painted across the horizon. 2 moons hung low, one silver-white and the other a pale green, casting dual shadows across the rocky terrain. "Survey team, check in," she said, adjusting the settings on her scanner. Tessa had been an archaeologist for 15 years, but this expedition felt different. The ruins before her predated any known civilization in this sector. "Patrol perimeter secure," came Dominic's voice through the comm, "though I'm getting strange energy readings from the eastern quadrant." "Noted," Tessa replied. "Juno, how's the atmospheric analysis?" "Stable for now," Juno's calm voice responded. "But there's something odd in the readings. Molecules I can't identify, almost like the air itself is remembering something." Tessa smiled to herself. Juno always had a poetic way of describing scientific anomalies. "Keep monitoring. I'm heading into the primary structure." The ruins rose before her like the skeleton of some massive beast that had died mid-transformation. Spires of iridescent crystal twisted skyward, connected by walkways that seemed to defy gravity. Materials that shouldn't exist outside of theoretical physics textbooks caught the light and scattered it in impossible patterns. Tessa approached what appeared to be an entrance, an archway carved with symbols that shifted when she tried to focus on them. "Nova, analyze these markings," she instructed her AI companion. The small drone hovering beside her shoulder emitted a soft blue light. Attempting analysis, Nova replied in its measured, androgynous voice. "Symbols appear to be dynamic. Not static inscriptions but responsive code." "Fascinating. Can you translate?" "Not directly. But patterns suggest an invitation." Tessa raised an eyebrow. "An invitation?" "The symbols are rearranging in response to your presence. They recognize you as something significant." Before she could question this further, the archway hummed to life. The space within it rippled like water, and the air grew heavy with static electricity. "Nova, stay close," Tessa instructed, stepping through the threshold. Inside, the ruins were transformed. What had appeared broken and decayed from outside was immaculate within, a vast chamber of spiraling architecture that seemed both organic and mathematical. Bioluminescent veins pulsed through transparent walls, throwing soft blue light across surfaces that glimmered like polished opal. "Incredible," Tessa whispered, her voice echoing strangely. "This place is still alive." She moved carefully through the chamber, documenting everything with her visor's recording system. The floor beneath her boots responded to her steps, lighting up in circular patterns that spread outward like ripples in a pond. "Tessa," Nova said suddenly. "Movement detected. 3 o'clock." She turned sharply, hand instinctively reaching for the pulse pistol at her hip. A figure stood in the shadows of a curved alcove, tall and slender, watching her with eyes that reflected light like a cat's. As the figure stepped forward, Tessa's breath caught. The being was humanoid but unmistakably alien. Skin like polished pearl with faint blue undertones. Hair, or something resembling it, floated around its head in tendrils that moved as if underwater. Most striking were its eyes, large, almond-shaped, and a luminous turquoise that seemed to hold galaxies within. Tessa remained perfectly still, training kicking in. First contact protocols dictated non-threatening posture, slow movements, open hands. The being tilted its head, studying her with those impossible eyes. Its expression shifted from curiosity to something Tessa couldn't quite define: wonder. Fear. Reverence. "You're real," the alien whispered, its voice melodic and accented in ways that made Tessa's universal translator struggle. "A human. Standing before me." Tessa nodded slowly. "Yes. My name is Tessa Reeves." The alien stepped closer, movements fluid and graceful as if partially untethered from gravity. Humans are legends where I come from. Stories told to children. Myths of the starwalkers who shaped galaxies and then vanished like morning mist. Tessa's scientific mind raced with questions, but she forced herself to remain calm. I assure you, we're quite real. And you are. Lyra, the alien said. I am Lyra of the Etherii. Last keeper of the Valky's archive. You've been here, waiting. For humans. Lyra's expression softened. Not waiting. Preserving. This place, what you call ruins, is a memory nexus. One of many left throughout the cosmos by your ancestors. My ancestors? Tessa couldn't keep the disbelief from her voice. Humans had only achieved interstellar travel 3 centuries ago. These ruins were millennia old. Not the short line you know, Lyra explained. The first line. The builders who came before the Great Sleep. A chill ran down Tessa's spine. This aligned with no accepted historical record, yet something deep within her responded to Lyra's words, a genetic memory perhaps, encoded in DNA older than civilization itself. You think my kind built this? Tessa gestured to the impossible architecture surrounding them. Not alone, Lyra said. With us. The Etherii were your companions, your students, your... She paused, searching for the right word. Symbiotes. Nova floated forward. The energy patterns in this structure do contain elements consistent with theoretical models of prehistoric human technology. Before the Dark Age. The Dark Age, that mysterious period after the fall of Earth's first global civilization. 1,000 years of history erased by some catastrophe no one could explain. Show me, Tessa said, her voice suddenly firm with purpose. Lyra's eyes widened slightly, then she nodded. Follow me to the heart chamber. They moved deeper into the complex, passing through corridors that twisted in directions that shouldn't be possible. The architecture responded to them, opening pathways and illuminating their route. Tessa noticed how differently the structure reacted to her presence versus Lyra's. For the Etherii, it was respectful acknowledgement. For Tessa, it was something like jubilation. The Nexus remembers you, Lyra explained, noticing her observation. Not you specifically, but what you are. The pattern of your thoughts, the rhythm of your biology. Human. They entered a vast circular chamber. At its center floated a crystalline structure resembling a double helix, spinning slowly and pulsing with inner light. The memory core, Lyra said. It contains the shared history of our peoples. Knowledge preserved against time and catastrophe. And you want me to, what exactly? To listen, Lyra said simply. The core has been dormant for 50,000 years, waiting for the right key. A human key. Tessa approached the floating helix cautiously. Scientific caution warred with an almost primal curiosity. How do I? Place your hand upon it, Lyra instructed. The core will do the rest. Tessa hesitated, then reached out. The moment her fingers touched the crystalline surface, the world exploded into light. Images flooded her mind, not just visual but sensory, emotional, complete. She saw Earth, but not as it was now. Earth in its prime, blue and green and perfect. She saw vast cities that blended seamlessly with nature, technology that worked with the world rather than against it. And then she saw the ships, hundreds, thousands of them, setting out across the stars. Humans and Etherii together, exploring, building, seeding life. She felt the pride of discovery, the joy of creation, the wonder of a universe opening before them. Then came darkness. Fear. A mistake. Something found or awakened that should have remained hidden. The connection broke suddenly, and Tessa stumbled backward, gasping. What was that? She demanded, her voice shaking. Lyra steadied her with a gentle touch. The beginning. The first chapter of a story you've forgotten. There was something at the end, something went wrong. Yes, Lyra said, her voice solemn. The reason your kind retreated, why you forgot yourselves. Why the Etherii became caretakers of empty monuments. I need to know more, Tessa said, her scientific detachment crumbling in the face of revelations that rewrote everything she thought she knew about human history. And you will, Lyra promised. But knowledge has consequences. The memory core is awakening now, responding to human presence after 50 millennia of silence. And we are not the only ones who will notice. As if on cue, the structure around them trembled slightly. Lights flickered, and a low humming sound began to build from somewhere deep below. What's happening? Tessa asked, tensing. Lyra's expression was grim. The archive is awakening fully. And with it, the systems your ancestors left to protect it. Protection sounds good. Not all protection is benevolent, Lyra replied. Some is designed to contain. To prevent the mistakes of the past from repeating. The humming grew louder. Panels in the walls began to slide open, revealing mechanisms that had slumbered for ages. We should go, Lyra said urgently. Now that a human has accessed the core, the verification protocols will activate. They will test whether humanity has overcome its past failures. And if we haven't? Lyra met her gaze, those turquoise eyes suddenly ancient and sad. Then the archive will ensure the mistakes remain buried. Along with anyone who has glimpsed them. Tessa's calm crackled to life. Tessa. It was Dominic, his voice strained. The ruins are changing. Energy levels spiking everywhere. What did you do in there? Apparently, Tessa said, looking at Lyra, I remembered something we spent 50,000 years trying to forget. They moved quickly toward the exit, the structure around them continuing to transform. What had seemed beautiful now felt ominous, a sleeping giant stirring after ages of dreaming. As they reached the entrance, Tessa paused and looked back at the heart of the archive. The crystalline helix was spinning faster now, its light pulsing in patterns that seemed almost like language. This isn't just about recovering lost history, is it? She asked Lyra. The Etherii shook her head, tendrils swaying. History and future are reflections of each other. The archive contains both memory and prophecy. Your ancestors left these places as warnings, as guides, and as weapons. Weapons against what? That, Lyra said softly, is what we must discover before it discovers us. Outside, the twin moons of Valky's 4 had aligned above the ruins, casting the landscape in eerie dual light. The excavation team had gathered, staring at the transformed structure with a mixture of awe and apprehension. Tessa looked at them, fellow humans who had no idea that their understanding of their own history was about to be completely upended. I need to contact command, she said to Dominic. Priority Alpha. What's going on? He asked, eyeing Lyra with undisguised wonder. Who is this? This is Lyra, Tessa said. And apparently, she's been waiting a very long time to tell us who we really are. In the distance, something beneath the planet's surface shifted in response to the archive's awakening. Ancient machinery, dormant for millennia, began cycling up to full power. The story that humanity had forgotten was about to be retold, whether they were ready for it or not. The memory keepers. The emergency bunker beneath their base camp hummed with tension. Tessa paced the length of the circular room while her team processed what she told them. Dominic stood with arms crossed, his weathered face a mask of skepticism. Juno sat quietly at the monitoring station, fingers dancing across holographic displays as she tried to make sense of the readings from the ruins. You realize how this sounds, Dominic finally said, breaking the silence. Humans as some kind of galactic forerunner species. It contradicts everything we know about our history. That's exactly the point, Tessa replied, stopping her pacing. What if everything we know is wrong? Or incomplete? Juno looked up from her station. The energy readings from the archive are unlike anything in our databases. Whatever that structure is, it's not operating on principles we fully understand. In the corner, Lyra sat observing them with those unsettling turquoise eyes. She'd been silent since they'd retreated to the bunker, allowing Tessa to brief her team. Now she spoke, her melodic voice cutting through their debate. "Your people's forgetting was not an accident," she said. "It was a choice, perhaps the hardest choice your ancestors ever made." All eyes turned to her. "What do you mean?" Tessa asked. Lyra rose, her movements fluid and graceful. "The archive showed you glimpses, fragments. But there is more." She approached the center of the room where a holographic projector stood. "May I?" Juno nodded, activating the device. Lyra placed her hand over it, and impossibly, the projector responded to her touch. A three-dimensional map of the galaxy materialized, dotted with pulsing lights. "Each light represents an archive like the one here on Valkyries," Lyra explained. "Nexus points in a network that once connected your civilization across thousands of worlds." "Thousands?" Dominic scoffed. "Humanity has colonized barely 20 systems." "Now," Lyra agreed. "But before the severing, your reach touched the edges of the galaxy." The hologram shifted, zooming in on one particular point. "Earth. The homeworld," Lyra continued. "Birthplace of humanity and the center of the network. 50,000 years ago, your kind achieved what most species never do, mastery of your world without destroying it. You reached for the stars not out of necessity, but curiosity." The hologram showed spacecraft, elegant and organic in design, nothing like the utilitarian vessels humans currently used. "You encountered the HFY early in your expansion. We became allies, collaborators. You taught us technology, we taught you perception beyond the physical. Together, we built the archive network to preserve knowledge, to connect worlds across vast distances." "If all this is true," Tessa said carefully, "what went wrong? Why would we forget our own history?" Lyra's expression darkened. The hologram shifted again, showing what appeared to be a tear in space itself, a wound in reality spilling darkness. "In your exploration, you encountered something ancient. Something that had slumbered in the void between galaxies. Your scientists called it the penumbra, an entity or force that existed partly in our reality and partly elsewhere." The hologram showed the darkness spreading, consuming stars. The penumbra fed on consciousness itself, on thought, memory, identity. Entire worlds were not just destroyed but unmade, their histories erased from the cosmic record. And it was drawn to the archives, to the concentrated knowledge they contained. "Like moths to flame," Juno whispered. "Precisely," Lyra nodded. "You fought, oh, how your kind fought, but conventional weapons were useless against something that existed partially outside our dimension. The war lasted centuries. Worlds fell. Species vanished. So what changed?" Dominic asked, his skepticism giving way to grim fascination. "Your ancestors made a sacrifice," Lyra said simply. "They realized the penumbra was drawn to advanced consciousness, to civilizations that had achieved a certain level of collective memory and knowledge. So they devised a plan. The hologram showed Earth again, surrounded by a complex network of energy. They would sever themselves from their own history. Regress technologically, culturally, become simple enough that the penumbra would no longer sense them. The remaining HFY and a few other allied species would become keepers of the archives, maintaining them in dormancy until humanity was ready to reclaim its legacy." "The Dark Age," Tessa breathed. "It wasn't just some catastrophe, it was intentional." "A deliberate forgetting," Lyra confirmed. "Your ancestors used the archive network to alter the collective consciousness of humanity, suppressing the knowledge of what you had been. They sacrificed advancement to ensure survival." The room fell silent as they absorbed this. Nova, who had been quietly processing the information, finally spoke. "Query, if the regression was meant to hide humanity from this penumbra entity, what are the implications of reactivating the archives now?" All eyes turned to Lyra, whose expression confirmed their fears. The archive on Valkyries is awakening, she said gravely. And its signal will eventually reach beyond this world. You're saying we might attract this thing back to our corner of the galaxy? Dominic asked. It never truly left, Lyra replied. It has been contained, dormant, like your memories. But yes, a fully activated archive could draw its attention once more. Tessa felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. So we should just, what? Abandon the ruins? Leave our history buried? No, Lyra said firmly. The archives were not just repositories of knowledge. They were also the weapons that nearly defeated the penumbra before your ancestors chose regression instead. If we can fully activate this nexus before the entity senses it, we might recover the tools to face it permanently. And if we fail? Juno asked quietly. Lyra met her gaze steadily. Then history repeats. The bunker's alarm system suddenly blared to life. Red emergency lights bathed the room as Juno spun back to her console. Something's happening at the archive, she reported tensely. Energy levels are spiking off the charts. Tessa moved to look over her shoulder. The readings were impossible, power outputs that would require a small star. It's continuing the activation sequence we started, Lyra explained. But without guidance, without purpose. We must return and complete the process correctly. Or? Dominic prompted. Or the archive's defensive systems will interpret the partial activation as a threat and initiate purge protocols. Define purge, Tessa demanded. The archive will destroy itself, and everything within a 1,000-kilometer radius. Tessa made a quick decision. Juno, you and Dominic evacuate the rest of the team. Get the ship ready for emergency departure. What about you? Dominic asked, already knowing the answer. I'm going back in with Lyra. We started this, we need to finish it properly. I'm coming with you, Nova stated, not a request but a declaration. Dominic looked like he wanted to argue but nodded curtly instead. You have 4 hours before we implement emergency extraction. With or without you. Understood, Tessa said. She turned to Lyra. Let's go fix what we broke. The journey back to the archive was fraught with new dangers. The landscape itself had begun to change, floating fragments of stone orbited the structure, and the ground pulsed with veins of energy that hadn't been visible before. The archive is drawing power from the planet's core, Lyra explained as they navigated the transformed terrain. Reshaping the environment to its original configuration. Original? Tessa asked, ducking under a floating boulder. What was this place before? A nexus hub. One of the primary connection points in the network. This entire region was once a city that housed millions, humans and Etherii working together. They reached the entrance, which had transformed into a massive doorway inscribed with shifting symbols. The archway no longer rippled like water but blazed with golden light. The verification protocols have begun, Lyra said. The archive is scanning all approaching entities, judging their worthiness to access the core. Judging by what criteria? Intention. Knowledge. Genetic markers. Lyra glanced at her. For you, bloodline is enough. For me, I must prove my lineage as a keeper. They stepped through the archway together. The interior had transformed even more dramatically than the exterior. What had been a single vast chamber was now a complex of interconnected spaces. Bridges spanned impossible chasms. Staircases wound in paradoxical directions. And at the center, the crystalline helix had expanded, now a towering spire of light that reached from floor to distant ceiling. The memory core is almost fully active, Lyra said. We must reach it and implement the authorization sequence before the defensive systems complete their assessment. And if they decide we're threats? Lyra's expression was grim. Then we become part of the archive's memory. They made their way toward the central spire, navigating paths that seemed to shift and change as they walked. Nova scouted ahead, mapping their route and warning of unstable sections. Tessa, the AI called suddenly. Anomaly detected ahead. They paused at the edge of a platform overlooking a vast circular chamber. In the center, orbiting the base of the spire, was a sphere of absolute darkness, a perfect void that seemed to absorb light itself. "What is that?" Tessa whispered. Lyra's face had gone pale, her luminous eyes wide with fear. "A fragment. A seed." "Of what?" "The penumbra. The archive must have contained it, a sample preserved for study." The darkness pulsed, as if aware of their presence. Why would anyone preserve a piece of the very thing that threatened to destroy them? Tessa asked. "To understand it. To find its weakness." Lyra's voice was tight. "Your ancestors were nothing if not thorough in their pursuit of knowledge. How do we get past it?" Lyra studied the chamber. "The seed is still contained, but barely. The archive's awakening is disturbing its stasis field. We need to reach those controls," she pointed to a console on the far side, "to reinforce the containment." "And then to the spire?" "Yes. The core terminal is just beyond." They descended carefully into the chamber, keeping close to the walls, as far from the hovering darkness as possible. Tessa could feel it somehow, a pressure against her mind, like standing too close to a speaker playing a subsonic tone. Nova floated cautiously beside them, sensors focused on the anomaly. The entity appears to be emitting signals on frequencies associated with neural activity. It may be attempting communication. "Do not respond," Lyra warned. "Do not even think directly about it. The seed senses consciousness and feeds on attention." They were halfway to the console when the darkness pulsed again, more violently. Tendrils of void began to extend from the sphere, probing the air around it. "It's breaking containment," Lyra hissed. "Run!" They sprinted for the console. One tendril of darkness lashed out, striking the floor where Tessa had been moments before. Where it touched, the material simply ceased to exist, not destroyed but erased, leaving a perfect hole in reality. They reached the console, and Lyra's fingers flew across its surface. Symbols and patterns responded to her touch, rearranging themselves in complex sequences. "The system recognizes me as a keeper," she said, "but I need your authorization as well. Place your hand here." Tessa pressed her palm to the indicated panel. Pain shot up her arm as something sampled her blood, her DNA. "Identity confirmed," announced a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Human genome authenticated. Keeper protocol active." A shield of golden light expanded from the console, pushing back the tendrils of darkness, forcing the seed to contract. Containment stabilized, Lyra sighed in relief. "Temporarily. Now the spire?" Tessa asked. "Yes. And quickly." They circled the chamber, keeping within the protection of the golden light, and approached the base of the crystalline spire. Up close, Tessa could see that what appeared to be crystal was actually something else, information made solid, data given form. At the base was another console, more complex than the first. This one responded as Tessa approached, lighting up with welcome. "What do I do?" she asked. "The archive needs your command," Lyra explained. "As a descendant of the builders, you must tell it what to do, continue awakening or return to dormancy." Tessa hesitated. "If we wake it fully, we risk attracting the penumbra. If we let it sleep, we lose the knowledge that might save us when the penumbra eventually returns anyway," Lyra finished. Nova hovered forward. "Suggestion: the archive contains defensive systems. Could those be activated selectively, without fully awakening all functions?" Lyra considered this. "It's possible. The network was designed with layered security. We could potentially activate the protective measures while keeping the knowledge repositories sealed." "A compromise," Tessa nodded. "Not forgetting entirely, but not risking everything at once." She placed her hands on the console. how do I specify that? Think it, Lyra said simply. The interface reads intent directly from neural patterns. Tessa closed her eyes, concentrating on the concept: awaken defenses, maintain containment, prepare but don't expose. The spire responded immediately. Light coursed through it in new patterns, and the entire structure hummed with changing energy. The golden shield around them expanded, reinforcing itself. It's working, Lyra breathed. The archive is reconfiguring. In the center of the chamber, the seed of darkness had contracted further, compressed by the strengthening containment field. A new holographic display appeared above the console, a galactic map similar to the one Lyra had shown them, but more detailed. Points of light began to appear across it, one by one. The network, Lyra explained. This archive is contacting the others, awakening their defensive systems but keeping the knowledge repositories dormant. Will it be enough? Tessa asked. Against the full penumbra, if it returns? I don't know, Lyra admitted. But it's a beginning. A compromise between remembering and safety. The process continued for several minutes, the map gradually filling with points of light. Then, without warning, the entire structure shuddered. Alarms sounded, and the golden light flickered. What's happening? Tessa demanded. Lyra studied the console in growing horror. The seed, it's sending a signal through the network connection. To what? To the rest. To the penumbra itself. The darkness at the center of the chamber pulsed triumphantly. Tendrils lashed against the containment field with new vigor. We need to sever the connection, Tessa said urgently. If we do, the defensive activation will remain incomplete. Some archives will be left vulnerable. Better than all of them being compromised. Lyra nodded grimly. She manipulated the console, and the map display flickered as connections began to disappear. We need to leave, she said. Now. The archive will enter emergency lockdown once the disconnection is complete. They ran, the chamber collapsing behind them as the archive structure began to reconfigure once more. Pathways shifted, doorways sealed, and new ones opened. It was as if the entire complex was folding in on itself, creating layers of protection around the contained seed. They reached the exterior just as the entrance arch began to contract. Diving through, they tumbled onto the transformed landscape as the opening sealed behind them with a sound like thunder. For long moments, they lay on the ground, catching their breath. Above them, the sky had darkened, the twin moons obscured by clouds that hadn't been there before. Did we succeed? Tessa finally asked. Lyra sat up slowly, looking back at the structure. It had changed again, now a perfect pyramid of shimmering material with no visible entrances. Partially, she said. The defensive network is awakening. The knowledge remains sealed. But the penumbra knows we're here now, Tessa finished. Yes. Not immediately, the signal was incomplete, but it will come. Eventually. Nova hovered between them. Incoming communication from Dominic. The evacuation is complete. They're waiting for us at the extraction point. Tessa stood, helping Lyra to her feet. So what now? The Etherii looked toward the stars, just becoming visible as the clouds thinned. Now humanity remembers its purpose. Not all at once, that would be too dangerous. But enough to prepare. For war. For continuation, Lyra corrected. Your ancestors chose forgetting as a strategy for survival. Now we choose selective remembering as a strategy for resistance. In the distance, Tessa could see the lights of the transport vehicle Dominic had sent for them. Beyond that, somewhere in orbit, waited their ship and the journey home, back to a humanity that had no idea its understanding of history was about to change forever. I suppose I should start practicing my "humans are actually an ancient advanced civilization" speech, she said wryly. The Archaeological Society is going to love this. They won't believe you, Lyra said simply. Not at first. The forgetting was thorough. Then we'll show them. Piece by piece. Archive by archive. Tessa looked back at the pyramid. We'll remember who we were. And decide who we want to be. Above them, the stars seemed to dim slightly, as if a shadow had passed across the face of the galaxy, a subtle reminder that somewhere in the vast darkness between worlds, something ancient had begun to stir once more. Your ancestors faced this choice once before, Lyra said quietly. Between knowledge with risk, or safety through ignorance. And what did they choose? Lyra smiled sadly. They chose both, in sequence. First knowledge, then forgetting when that knowledge proved too dangerous. And now? Now it's your turn to choose. But perhaps this time, there's a third path. Knowledge tempered by wisdom. Power balanced with restraint. The transport arrived, hovering above the ground as its door slid open. Dominic waved urgently from within. Come on, Tessa said. Let's go tell humanity about its past. And its future. As they boarded the transport, Tessa looked back one final time at the transformed archive. For just a moment, she thought she saw the pyramid flicker, not with malfunction but with purpose, as if sending a message across the stars. A warning. A beacon. A reminder of what humanity had been and might become again. The memory keepers had awakened. And somewhere in the darkness beyond, the penumbra stirred in response. The oldest game in the galaxy had begun anew.